Okay, so I just wanted to thank everyone for joining our virtual workshop and Q&A titled Facial Recognition, Surveillance, and Snapchat, a look through the lens of artist Leo Selvaggio. This event is part of our Hidden Figures Celebrating Diversity in Computing and Tech series. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce our featured speaker and my friend Leo Selvaggio. Leo is an interdisciplinary artist and designer whose work examines the entanglement of identity with technology within the context of civic action. He has exhibited in France, Canada, Switzerland, Netherlands, and broadly in the US. Salvaggio's work has been featured in Businessweek, Hyperallergic, Techcrunch, The Washington Post, CNET, The Verge, and others. His work is included in various collections, including the Spy Museum and the Wende Museum in the US. Leo's writing can be found in several publications, including the International Journal for Performance Arts and the recent book, The Evolution of the Image, Political Action and the Digital Self. He holds a BFA from Rutgers University and an MFA from Columbia College's Interdisciplinary Arts program. Currently, he serves as an Instructional Media Technologist for the Multimedia Labs at Brown University. So welcome, Leo. We are so glad to have you this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. This is really exciting and such an exciting topic, especially with the documentary Coded Bias becoming available to so many more people now on Netflix. It's a conversation that needs to be had for sure.
Absolutely. So did you want to start with a few slides? I can give you co-hosting capabilities, or if you could share your screen.
Yeah, I think we'll do share screen.
Okay, you should be able to share now then.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I see. Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, excellent. All right, seeing my slides, wonderful. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Leo Selvaggio, and I'm a queer, white-presenting Colombian American artist, designer, lover of all things cheese-related, and a hopeful disruptor at heart. My work thinks of identity as data that can be manipulated or even corrupted in an increasingly networked society. I'm interested in how this data is tied to the larger context of surveillance and how the prejudicial architecture our surveillance systems are built upon affects how we perform those identities in public space. Today, I'm going to dive into my seminal project titled Your Me Surveillance, which reflects the various themes in the documentary Coded Bias. I will also quickly show some newer projects related to issues of surveillance and power. And lastly, we will demystify some of these technologies by looking at the back end of Snapchat's Lens Studio as we create an AR facial tracking filter for the popular social media platform. Your Me Surveillance is both an analog and digital anti-facial recognition project in which I provide the user with a 3D printed prosthetic of my face to wear in public space, which then attributes all of their actions as my own. In addition to offering protection, through their participation, users engage in an act of communal resistance by collectively performing my identity across different locations and bodies, producing disinformation that's fed back into their surveillance system. So a little bit of context about when I was starting this project back in 2014. There were two artists working in the field at the time whose creative practice really influenced my work, and that's Harvey and Blass. In 2013, Harvey created CV Dazzle, a method that uses makeup to confound facial recognition software. Facial recognition in part works based on feature detection, such as analyzing the distance between each eye or the size of a person's chin. And by adding makeup, Harvey is able to successfully change how these features appear. When applied effectively, a camera can't even detect a face, let alone identify it. Similarly, Blass has been working on his facial weaponization suits since 2011. Arguably the most famous of these suits is Fag Face, which is a model comprised of several queer men's faces. These faces, as with all of his suits, are collected through a series of community-based workshops. The faces are scanned, digitally meshed together, and then fabricated. Because of the distorted features of these masks, when worn, they do successfully hide your face from biometric scans. And this idea of hiding is in fact the most prevalent strategy both in and out of the art community that's offered to the public. The majority of YouTube videos on the subject of anti-surveillance include how-to videos involving the use of ski masks, hoodies, and the hat-sunglasses combo. Unfortunately, these strategies can draw significant attention to the user. And in the United States, we have too many tragic examples of how the hiding that comes with wearing a hoodie is often associated with criminality. Furthermore, from a sociological point of view, the nature of surveillance has changed drastically in a post-9/11 United States. Cameras aren't the only thing that needs to hide. Cameras aren't the only thing one needs to hide from in an if you see something, say something kind of world. A world where the public has been co-opted as agents of surveillance as well. Therefore, I came to two conclusions that became part of my criteria to address the prevailing strategy of hiding in anti-surveillance artwork. The first was that I needed to create a new strategy if I wanted results that did not immediately associate the wearer as suspicious or criminal. Simply continuing to hide a face with new aesthetics would not suffice. The second conclusion was that in addition to facial recognition systems, I had to consider the role of the general public as agents of surveillance as well. I required a strategy that would protect the user from being identified by cameras in the way that Harvey and Blass's work does, but aesthetically speaking, would pass inconspicuously in a crowd of people as well. So when I was approaching this, I was really looking at other disciplines to help inform the way that I looked at the subject matter. And one of those fields was cybernetics. And one of the best tools that's come out of cybernetics is this model of the feedback loop, which essentially is just a representation of how the actions of a system can affect that very same system. So let's use this tool to better understand how facial recognition works. So this is essentially the basics of facial recognition. The camera sees a face, and then the system tries to compare that face with faces that it has in a database and asks, is there a match? If there isn't, then the system stops and breaks down the loop. If there is, it continues, and the system starts calling up information about the matched identity. The system then adds new information based on the current surveillance back into that profile, into that identity, and then the process begins again. So when looking at this loop, I realized that most of the interventions I had seen really only engage one part of this loop. They all try to keep the camera from actually seeing a face. And this makes sense since this is the only part of the loop or process that's really visible or tangible. In fact, very few people, including myself, really know how the back end of this system works. So once I realized that not only do I need a new strategy, but I also needed to engage the system at a different point in the process. So I began to analyze the other sections of this loop for any assumptions that were made in the design of this system that I might be able to exploit. And this is what I came up with. The system assumes that the face the camera sees is an accurate indicator of identity. Or in other words, the system assumes that identifying the face on camera will also accurately identify the body on camera because it operates within a framework where identity is stable rather than fluid. It's logical, but it's also an assumption and one that I could use. The other thing that working with this cybernetic framework produced was a reframing of the way that I saw the system. So first, let's go back to Harvey, Blass, and YouTube. As we discussed, they all try to hide the face, right? And in doing so, doing that is an attempt to disrupt the system by stopping it at a single point. In this scenario, the system just isn't happy. It's not getting the input that it wants. And I hate to say it, but I started to think of the system like a small child, or maybe more like this cat, you know? It needs to be fed. It's hungry, right? And if I was going to exploit that design assumption, I needed to give the system what it wants, which is a face. perhaps a devastatingly handsome face, if you will, my own. And that's just a joke. I hope that carries over well. I never know how to land that joke. It's not a good one. Anyway, so now going back to our cybernetic model, right? We have to follow through with the system. Once the system establishes a match between the prosthetic worn by the user and my face in the database, it'll call up my information, thereby protecting the user. But the last part is where it gets interesting. The system adds information about what the body is doing in public space, but adds it to my identity profile. This produces disinformation. For example, if multiple users were to wear this prosthetic and become Leos in different areas of the same city at the same time, facial recognition systems would have conflicting locative information. The identity Leo Selvaggio would be inhabiting Main Street and Carmen Boulevard and Michigan Avenue and so on. Additionally, as the body of each individual wearer is different, there may also be inconsistent or contradictory data gathered about my height, weight, gender, gait, all of these types of things. So you can imagine that when done on a large enough scale, these conflicting data sets call into question facial recognition systems' ability to accurately determine the true identity of any face that's captured in camera-based documentation. But at its highest level, Your Me is a critique of power and heteronormative cisgendered white male privilege. And it posits a scenario in which if we can't remove that privilege from the system, perhaps it can be distributed to others through its performance. Though Your Me began as a simple idea, it's ended up borrowing from a variety of different disciplines, including critical race theory, queer and gender studies, cybernetics, as I mentioned before, civics, and performance, and represents my interdisciplinary approach to engaging with research, which has also informed some of my more recent projects. One of the outcomes of my work with Your Me surveillance was an understanding of just how much surveillance technology is leveraged against the public. Specifically made with protesters and activists in mind, the WWWW project attempts to shift that scale back in the people's favor by sharing open source DIY designs that will transform a smartphone into a streaming hands-free body camera. The project is purposefully low-tech, utilizing everyday materials such as button-down shirts, baseball caps, and Legos to make it as accessible as possible to the public. Another project that I worked on recently, which relates more to the Snapchat filters, which we'll be taking a look at is this project, Apologize to America. So emulating the tactical media strategies made popular by the Yes Men, who are fantastic. Definitely look up the Yes Men if you're interested in tactical media. My recent exploration of AR technology led me to create Apologize to America, a speculative and participatory project that leverages Snapchat's AR Lens Studio to invite the public to perform apologies we could never hope to hear from the 45th President of the United States. And here's a submission from SS in Chicago.
I'm sorry, America, that I stood up in front of the entire country and mocked a man with a disability. I'm sorry that I cannot be a role model for your kids. I'm a bully and a coward, and I don't have the capacity.
Though purposefully not a deep fake, Apologize to America aims to provide an opportunity for communal catharsis, while at the same time asserting the need for accountability. The advent of these technologies further complicates our relationship to both the stability and performance of identity by implicating our faces and bodies on the front line of technological development and disparity. Who and how are we watching and being watched? Which brings us to our kind of activity today, which is taking a look at Snapchat's AR filter system called Lens Studio. One of the really cool things about Lens Studio is that anyone can download it and anyone can create these filters. And in my own kind of like very informal research, one of the things that's been really, really interesting is to find that that in many ways, I've tried to evaluate the system for things like racial bias and have found really, really good results. I've fed, images and videos of individuals with very, very dark skin tones. I've also fed it images of people with different types of facial attributes, such as severe cleft palates, and it's still done a good job of being able to map things onto the face. Now, one distinction is that facial detection and facial mapping is very different than facial recognition. Facial recognition requires a database. It's making a comparison against other information to identify a more select category. Facial detection pretty much just looks for a face. So its algorithm is looking for a short dash, long dash. That's pretty much all it is. So that is much easier to be able to say, like, there is a face there, there isn't a face there, versus that's Leo's face, or that's Nicole's face, or that's Mario's face, or that's Elena's face, right? So something to keep in mind, but hopefully by looking at the back end, we'll be able to kind of demystify some of this technology, and also show that the bias comes not just from the architecture of the software that's being produced, but also by the creators. So one of the largest kind of criticisms of Snapchat's filters don't come from the technology that's being distributed by its technical team, but from the content producers that are creating beauty filters that brighten your skin and make your eyes larger or more European. And that all comes from users like myself and like potentially yourselves if you decide to use this platform. So that's something else worth considering. So I'm going to turn off my camera and share a different screen. Just give me one moment. I'm going to do the entire desktop. Okay. Share. All right, can everyone see my screen? Okay. Assuming that was a yes, because I can't see anyone else. All right, sweet. All right, so this is what Lens Studio looks like in the background. Now, one great thing about Lens Studio is that, as I mentioned, it's free to download. You can download it for Macs, you can download it for Windows, and they put very little restrictions on what you can and can't do with the actual software. Once you publish it, it does go through a review process. But this is kind of what it looks like. Now, can I see in the chat how many people find this interface potentially intimidating? Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that. Yes, and we have a comment from yes, no. Okay, good. All right, great. It's good to get a baseline. So very quickly, I'm going to show you the overview of what the backend looks like. So there's several different panels that we're going to look at. This panel here, the objects panel. Also, can you see my cursor? Okay, great. All right, so this objects panel, essentially, these are the different types of ways that we can interact with the Snapchat filters. And you'll see here that under camera effects, there's this setting called demo 1 head binding. So if I click this off and you look over in the viewer panel all the way to the right, the preview panel, you notice that by clicking it off, the flower that comes from the 500 Women Scientists logo is no longer visible. So these are the kind of objects that we're going to add to our scene, if you will. Same thing with this demo head 2 binding, right? And then lastly, over here with this demo text. All right, so that's the objects panel. Down here is the resource panel. This is where we can import our own kind of media. So I was able to work on the 500 Women Scientists logo for this, and I broke it down into a bunch of different parts, and I uploaded it here, and it's very easy to do that. You can click plus here, and then from files, and you can find whatever kind of media you've already created that you need and just add it. So I preloaded that to make this a little bit easier, but one of the great things about this is that like you can come in with your own media, and you should, because that's part of what makes it your own. In the center here, this is where we kind of work on laying out our different objects based on the type of object that we choose. And this will make a lot more sense as we build this thing. And you can go back and forth between a 3D scene. So here you can see that there's this potential kind of like face mask here, and we have placed the flower here, and we have the 500 women scientists over here, and what have you. And you can switch between 3D and 2D scenes. Here in the inspector, you'll see that nothing's selected. If I select this and this is essentially where we get to mess around with all the different types of attributes of each type of object. And we'll see what that looks like in a moment as well. And then last is the preview panel. So one of the cool things about the preview panel is you have all of these different options for how you preview things and how you're going to take a look at your design. So for instance, what is it here? Now I have a live camera, right? So I'm able to use my laptop camera here. Also under these are preloaded, but you can also add your own. So you have all different types of options. There's like open mouth person. So this is so that you can test, like if you want to trigger something based on when someone smiles or opens their mouth, you can do that. You've got raising eyebrows and all different types of motions. And then you've also got, you can also upload your own files. So that's not live. That is, that's a video I took of me when I had green hair about a month ago. So yeah, so really, really useful. So I'm going to go back to, what was it? I think it was smile and smile person one. Okay, so I'm going to build this from scratch with you all. So I'm going to get rid of this, and then get rid of this. So we only have the preview. Now, one thing that I want to really drive home is that I know like maybe 5% of what you can do with this program. And it's one of those things where even just learning the very basics, which are very easy to do, you can create some really, really interesting things. So let's start out with recreating this flower piece. So if we go into objects and we press plus, we are going to see under here face effects. And this is just a scroll, by the way. So if we scroll down, we would have seen it anyway. And we are going to choose something called head binding. So if we click on head binding, you'll notice that the inspector populates and there's this thing called face index. And all of a sudden we got these two face masks. Now with face index, this is kind of important. If you're only assuming that one person is going to be in the scenario, which this is, you're going to want to make sure that this is always set to 0. So the face index is which face do you want this thing to go to? So if you had a group of 3 people, you could have different effects per person happen. But since we're only working with one face, we're going to set it to 0. Then we're going to add a component. And this is essentially where we're going to add our 2D file. So we're going to hit 2D and we're going to hit image. And you'll notice that over here, we now have this kind of like floating image thing here, right? And you can see in the preview window how you can attach that to the eye, you can attach that to the mouth, you can have it float in free space. And we're going to put it like about here. And you'll also see that it's just an icon, right? So it's not populated yet. So if we go back to our inspector where we see image, you'll see that there's this option for texture and it's the same icon. If I click that and I select one of my images, now these images are here because I populated them already in the resources folder. But let's say that I hadn't, I could go here from files. I'm going to go to my 500 Women Scientists folder. I'm going to grab the logo flower and I'm going to click open. You'll notice it populates down here and then I hit OK. And now we have our flower. And you can manipulate it the way that you kind of expect. You can scale it, you can rotate it. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. There we go. Okay, sorry, forgot about that part. So there's this option for align to camera that allows you to have a few more options, like the ability to rotate. So this is kind of where we had things before. You'll also notice that there are different blend modes. So I think I chose an overlay or a hard light. There are all of these different types of options that you can do. And you can also play with how transparent it is, lots of different things, right? So I'm gonna leave it at overlay. And that is literally just one object. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do it again for the 500 Women Scientists, the tagline. So I'm gonna go back to object. I'm gonna go hit head binding. I'm gonna make my face index 0 so that it's all on the same face. I'm gonna add component. I'm gonna hit image. You'll see my image here. And I'm going to hit texture. And I'm going to pick the tagline, which is here. Huh. That's interesting. Huh. It's on the 3AC. Sorry, that's interesting. That shouldn't have happened. Binding, tagline, cancel, depth test. Oh, that's weird. Okay. I don't know why that was selected. So as you can see, there is a bit of a learning curve. There is this depth test that was selected, which I didn't select. But as you can see, you can kind of futz around with it. And we had this about here. Now, as you'll notice, one of the things is that these objects are moving based on where you put them and how the camera is interpreting the movement of the model, right? So let's say you wanted some text that's just flat. We can do that by going here to the object and hitting screen text. And this becomes a stand-in for our preview. And as you can see, the text that's here is populated in the preview window. So you can manipulate the text in here, which is great. And you'll notice that that text isn't moving. So what did I put? I think I put something like, this scientist is from, and you may have seen that, that I think it said Santa Monica, right? However, I didn't actually type in Santa Monica. There is a really cool thing where you can insert dynamic text, and this is text that it gets from the phone. So you can put in your altitude, you can put in your city, which is what I put, and you'll see that Santa Monica populated. But when you try this on your own, you can actually, it will take your geographic location from your phone and input it there. You can also put things like day and time, October 5th, 2021, 4:36 p.m., right? And then you can manipulate the text as you would many other programs. So you can choose a different font. For instance, I'm going to try Merriweather. You can change the font size. You can change the color. So I think I turned it into a kind of like orange, yellowy, marigold type of thing. You can add an outline. And then of course you can move it. And that's essentially how you create a filter. The next step is essentially to just publish the lens, which I'm not exactly going to show you because I've already published this, so you won't see it, but it's fairly straightforward. You do need a Snapchat account in order to do it, but when you press it, it will give you these options. You can do things like adding an image here, although that one's probably not the best one to do. Let's try something else. Maybe just the regular logo. That's probably a little bit better. And what have you, and then hit submit. So very quickly and very easily, we were able to make, a kind of interesting filter that you can use for engagement. There's all different types of things that you can do. You can do particle systems, you can do interactivity where you're like tapping on the map and stuff like that. All different types of things. And as you can see, my Urmi surveillance filter, which I currently have on, was created using the Lens Studio. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it off so you can actually see me, which, oh, look, the same. Not quite. And yeah, so I hope you found that backend inspiring and that you consider making content on these types of platforms and thinking really critically about the choices that you're making while you're doing so. And I think with that, that's all I had. So I think we can open it up to Q&A.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
When you sent me the Snapchat filter, I was like, oh yeah, I've never used Snapchat before, and I had to download it and figure it out yesterday. So I was like,
Yes.
oh man, you're making me download another thing.
And let me put this, so this is a link that you can access the 500 Women Scientists filter. Now, it's not an official filter. Snapchat did not like hire me to do it. I just kind of did for demonstrational purposes.
Right.
But you'll see like there's even a prompt that goes away when you record that asks like for you to share like who you are and a little bit about your work and to share it on Instagram. So all different types of stuff.
Cool.
Well, thank you. I love claps. So I think we can either take questions either through audio if anyone wants to turn their mic on, or through chat if that is more appealing. While we wait for questions, if there are any, I should mention another thing about Snapchat Studio, which is that I didn't show you like when you first turned it on, but they have all of these sample projects, which are kind of amazing. And you can like download them isn't the right word, but you can kind of like cannibalize or absorb them. So like you can click on the demo project that shows you like how to turn your face into a particle system. And you can use that very same build out, like all of the objects and stuff for your own lens. You can just switch out the images or change the location, but you can use it yourself. So there are examples where you don't even have to figure things out. You can literally just take something that they're offering you. Like, let's say it's a, one of the popular ones, I think, is like some kind of like sunglasses detection, right? So you're looking at something like machine learning, where it looks for when you have sunglasses on your eyes and then it pops something on top of it, right? So that's a very, very complicated thing. But you can literally just like download it, bring it into your studio, and just change the image file of what it does and not have to figure out any of the machine learning, which is pretty cool. They're also doing stuff like ASL recognition, which is kind of cool. So you can do sign language to have different effects happen. And some people have also used it to be able to do like kind of nonverbal Zoom things, where you can use like fist detection, like, you know, like if you go like this, it'll say like, I agree. If you go like this, it means, sorry, everyone, I have to leave, you know, and it just like populates an animation, which is kind of cool. Shoot, Leslie.
Okay, hi Leo. I guess my question's around some of the themes that were brought up in the Coded Bias documentary film. I think we acknowledge the fact that it's the data and the lack of representation in tech as to why certain communities are being discriminated against when it comes to education, housing, access to finance.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question is, in terms of the lack of representation in tech, there's obviously that's not a quick fix. So I guess what's your viewpoints in terms of what are some of those short-term fixes to address the lack of representation in tech? We know there's a pipeline problem. You know, we know that there's not enough people, you know, Black women in tech, people of color in tech, etc. But it's going to take time for us to get the numbers that we need. So what would you say are some of the kind of, you know, short-term fixes that can address some of the kind of poor data and kind of the lack of representation in tech?
That's a phenomenal question. And I think it goes back to some kind of fundamentals of how we understand technology and science, which I think is something that we're seeing play out in real time with the pandemic, in terms of like who is attributed as an authority and who isn't, what is research and what isn't. So I think addressing those kinds of issues are really, really important. And I think are probably the most short-term solution is like acknowledging and believing when people say that that these softwares are primarily made only by white men and therefore reflect white, you know, biometrically, the algorithms that are being used to identify faces are based on databases of white men because white men built them, right? So acknowledging that, and acknowledging that even more broadly, that technology is not a solution for human bias. I think, or the belief, the kind of desire to believe that technology nullifies human bias. I think by showing enough examples of that through, I think, things like Coded Bias. One of the great things about Coded Bias is it does such an excellent job and takes so many different viewpoints. But the best part about it is that it's on Netflix. That like literally like millions of people have access to these types of exemplars that are well researched, right? So the short term is changing the culture that thinks that technology is neutral. And you can do that before you, I think there are ways to do that before you ramp up the representation, and they can happen in parallel. So while you're trying to increase the representation, which is absolutely necessary, you can also demonstrate things like this. And that's hopefully what I'm hoping that, what I know things like Coded Bias and what I'm hoping my work does as well, is I'm not really interested in this work because of the way it looks in a gallery or the way, you know, it's presented in that kind of field. It's more about these kind of conversations that you and I are having. This is the artwork as far as I'm concerned, in terms of like just having these conversations about technology. And I don't think we have enough of them. I don't know what your age bracket is, Leslie, but one of the examples that I always come back to is Dolly, the first cloned sheep, which, oh God, I don't even know the years, but I was a kid. I was like maybe a teenager. And I remember when Dolly, the first cloned sheep came out, it was the topic. It was the only thing talked about for about a month at every dinner table, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, religious beliefs. You know, it didn't matter. Everyone had an opinion on that. And that kind of public discourse is what I think has been missing from our technological development as a society in whole, because it's growing so exponentially that we can't keep up with it. So we're like, you know, like, well, does it start my Spotify for me? Okay, scan my face. You know, like I can't keep up. Sorry, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. I think one of the things I kind of see Joy as a trailblazer, because to your point, she's bringing the topic of, you know, AI biases and ethics to an audience that may not be aware of some of these challenges. I work in technology, but you know, even within the technology field, it's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's and I think that's the key thing. What she's doing, she's making it accessible for people that may not be aware of some of the challenges and some of the issues. So she's doing some great work. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for answering that question.
Yeah, my pleasure. If no one else has a question, could I ask a question of the group?
Yeah, sure.
I think I would be interested in hearing about your relationship with surveillance. How do you identify with it or not identify with it? Where is your locus of control when it comes to surveillance or being surveilled? Because I think it's a very different question or a very different answer for everyone. And it's something that I don't think a lot of, well, I think it's a question that like you either think about or you don't, in varying degrees based on your on your experiences and your identity.
Hey, Leo, can you hear me?
I can. Hey, Mario, how are you?
Good. How are you, man? Thank you for sharing with us. I mean, all your knowledge, man. This is really interesting and really amazing to see. You know, your work is. I saw your work from the beginning, and I mean, it's amazing, man, to know you, and thank you for everything that you're sharing with us. I have a question. I mean, I feel like we live in a very anxious society these days, and honestly, it's hard to really keep up with everything that is happening, right? Because sometimes, you know, you have million accounts, you don't remember the username, the passwords, so you just put your face, and then, you know, everything is scanned. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how my mom does it, because I mean, her generation is different than mine, and I still struggle, you know, sometimes. Now with the pandemic and everything that is happening, one of the things that I have a question also, I want to answer your question. I mean, for me, surveillance, I feel like surveillance has become more active these days because of COVID. One quick example, for example, I live in CNET, New Jersey, and I know, for example, like when COVID happens and a lot of people are staying home, I saw more cameras being installed in the houses, even though, you know, nobody really, I mean, somebody really breaks in this area. It's really, I mean, come on, it's not really, you know, I don't live in but somehow I guess we are so anxious that we want to know what's going on, you know. It's almost like you want to look 360, you know, to who's next to you, and then your phone is also part of that. So what do you think in terms of the future of facial recognition? What is like the dangers? Like, can companies sell, let's say your symmetry, your face, to kind of get a database and everything? So what do you think about what's the future for facial recognition? Basically, is good, bad, or not? I mean, there's no good or bad, or what are your thoughts about it?
Oh God, Mario, such a great question. I tend to be a bit of a fatalist. I mean, I am hopeful, but I'm also a fatalist. So it's a hard question to answer. What I will say is that our current examples are not very positive.
Right.
You have like systems in China where facial recognition is being used in public restrooms to determine like how many sheets of toilet paper you can use. And then you've also got like systems in California where police forces are using facial recognition to create what did they call them, like threat quotients. So if a police officer is responding to a call or something in an area, they will use cameras to scan the area, and if they come up with matches, that will determine the quotient of like how they respond, meaning whether they go in with guns drawn first or not.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty horrible is I think my thing. What I would say is that, and this is a larger question, a larger thing that needs to be considered is that all of this, like, I think that the face is facial recognition and the face are so an embroiling topic because like our faces are so personal to us. We like to think of them as being, very unique. Like no one else has my face. In
Right.
reality, lots of people have your face somewhere in the world, right? We've seen photographers do this where like, like they find people that look like each other and you can't tell them apart and they take like a double mint gum kind of like photo with them, right? But the larger context of this is the fact that we now live in a world where just walking through this world produces data that is being monetized by people other than
Right.
the people that are producing it, right? So there's this really great artwork called Wages for Facebook. I cannot remember the name of the artist right now. But it was based on a women's suffrage movement called, I think it was like Wages for Housework. And the original movement was about women coming together, I believe, in Eastern Europe to kind of say that they deserved wages for all of the housework that they did. And then this other artist kind of, I don't want to appropriate is not the right word, but like they kind of like took that model and applied it to things like social media data mining, where like every single time you use the platform, you're not making money, you're making that company money. So you should be considered an employee. You should get things like health benefits. You should get things like paid time off because you are literally producing the capitalist, like you're literally producing the product, right? So I think that's the larger question, whether it's facial recognition or whether it's your phone or whether it's what you post on social media. All of this data that you're producing, you are not in control of. So I think the first thing is taking back control of personal data, and that has to come through the law. And that is what Joy was doing at Congress, essentially, is fighting that kind of battle. I will tell you what I extrapolate. So this is like science fiction in my head, but when I think about Your Me surveillance and the work that I've done there, when I think of its ultimate conclusion is a future in which, Mario, you are wearing my face and I'm wearing your face and Nicole is wearing her own face, because the assumption that faces are attached to bodies no longer exists. Like that's the logical conclusion of the work that I'm producing. It's not perfect, but if we can get to a place where camera-based documentation is no longer like valid in this way, then I think that's one way that we can break facial recognition systems in general. And we see a long history of this in judiciary evidence, right? At first, it was the photograph. The photograph's infallible. And then we learned that you could doctor film. Then it was video. Video is infallible because it's moving. You can't edit it, right? And then that, and then it became DNA. And now we know that you can spoof DNA. So now it's facial recognition. And the United States loves to try and find some kind of foolproof way to put people in prison. And it's just all related in that respect. So lots to think about, but yeah, I think so long as our faces are being part of it, until we get laws that allow us to, to own that data back, like technology ethics and the law have not been developed nearly at the same rate that technological development has.
Right. And do you know if there is any country that, they have laws right now these days that they actually have, some kind of regulation on, what can they be sale or, because like you're saying, we become a product, but we don't get any benefit from it. Just looking at your pictures or your friends or stalking other persons, But besides that, we don't get nothing. Everything's monetized. These days, it's almost like money is God kind of thing. Everybody wants to monetize something from somebody.
Yep.
Nobody wants to pay you because that's apparently, the capitalism idea, basically, invest less, gain more, I guess. But there's countries that they are doing something about it. Do you know?
I know that there's a lot of grassroots happening. I think England is, or Great Britain, I should say, is like leading some of this fight, primarily because they have been some of the worst when it comes to surveillance. Like, I think now there's a counterculture being produced. I think that the Netherlands also might have some interesting laws or legal kind of things that we're starting to see. But I'll be honest, I don't have the expertise to really answer that question.
Okay.
Great question, though.
No, yeah, I'm always curious about that. But I have more questions. But thank you, man. Thank you. It was nice seeing you.
Yeah, you too.
Oh, I just have a quick question. So 500 Women Scientists, we have what's called pods, and they're like local chapters all over the world. Are there things that individual pods can do to combat facial recognition, or just to like bring awareness to like what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, so many things. I think in terms of it's such a political issue. It so revolves around laws. So honestly, getting out, protesting, being part of activist events, asking, your local councilman or other candidates, like where they are on these things is really, really important. There are lots of great organizations as well. The one that I think of the most is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF. They have incredible programs where you can start a community chapter or you can start a community action using their guidelines that have, it's more than just facial recognition. Surveillance in general is a huge part of it. I believe Joy also had the Algorithmic Justice League, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another thing. But to me, it's like the facial recognition system as a technology, its inner workings are so hidden that it's hard to combat, right? It's hard to, it's one of the reasons why in that loop, most of the artists are like just trying to destroy the camera or just trying to, make the camera not work, right? Because everything else is like, large computer servers hidden somewhere in Ohio. It's like, so yeah, but I would say that it's like all of the fights that you see out there about police body cameras, those are the fights. Those are the things that are super tangible, super unfortunately emotionally saturated because of all of the horrible things that are happening. But the truth is that any kind of way to combat surveillance will combat facial recognition. Facial recognition is just one small way that this is happening, and it's an important way, but I got involved with it because of how closely it's tied to identity. There are other ways that we're being surveilled that might be much more prevalent to communities than facial recognition specifically. So really just making sure that people aren't getting away with it, taking the extra time to, use a number code instead of like face unlock on your phone, like things like that, I think go a long way. And honestly, continuing to have opportunities to have discussions like this, I think this is, this is huge.
Leo, I've got one question,
Yeah.
kind of similar to Mario's question. I kind of feel the future looks very scary when I think about what the world and society would look like for my grandchildren, and when we think about our grandparents. We've got tech organizations that are doing research on their own solutions and services that actually is proving the fact that they are harmful, and they are not doing anything to kind of prevent that harm when it comes to society and communities, and actually it's creating a more divided society. We're hearing about how some platforms, social media platforms, are actually harming young women when it comes to self-image and and in terms of confidence, etc. It's a scary world. And I've grown up, I grew up in a world where we had dial-up, and just thinking about the technology, even in my generation, I feel like I'm just getting old now, where I'm even amazed, to Mario's point, like just how technology has just, how we've innovated so quickly. And I just don't think enough people are talking about this topic, because I think we're almost stunned by how quickly technology is progressing, and we're being left behind. We don't really know how it all works. And I think I'm a bit fearful you hear of tech executives not allowing their children to spend more than X amount of time on social media and things like that, because they understand the challenges, because they work in it. And I think, as to my point, what's your views on that in terms of society, and how, and can we, what apart from educating ourselves and protesting, what else can we do? Because as I said, I don't think enough people are really talking about it.
Yes. So yes, thank you for bringing that up, Leslie, because there was another component to Mario's question that I didn't quite answer, which I think you asked again, which is like what is the result of having all of this surveillance and technology, right? And so for me, my largest concern is not privacy, and that is because from a personal standpoint, I live a very privileged life. I am, white presenting. I am, treated in the way that the most disgusting, like valued, group of society, is. So I've lived a very privileged life. And so therefore, I'm able to say, like, I don't care about privacy. Like, you want my, you want my nudes, you want like to know what I'm doing, like whatever, like I don't care. So like there's two different like philosophies or strategies when it comes to battling surveillance. The first is that like you hide, right? You try to hide, you try to encrypt, you try to make yourself less visible, right? And then there's the other option, which is the one that I happen to ascribe to, and I say that acknowledging fully my privileged status, which is the opposite. Flood. Give them so much information, it's impossible to weed through it. Like the second that you no longer become kind of attached to the idea of hiding or occluding, and you just put yourself out there, it becomes much harder for, I think it becomes much harder for certain things to happen and create disinformation. So there's a great example of this where, oh God, why can I not remember his name right now? There's an incredible artist who was put on the no-fly list of, and this was like right after post 9/11. He's a Muslim American artist, put on the no-fly list. And he created a project where he just published his whereabouts every hour and sent it to the FBI. Like every hour he just sent them an email. This is where I'm at. 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 So much so that he produced such a huge archive of his whereabouts that it became impossible for them to do anything with it, right? So anyway, sorry. To get back to that original point is I think that the effects are, so I'm not concerned about privacy. I'm concerned about the expansive breadth of the human condition and what it means to be human. There are tons of psychological studies that show that when we are observed, our behavior changes. We modulate it based on lots of different systems of value, right? This is probably most evident in children, right? You know, as soon as they're like mom, you know, or father or authority figure, you know, walks in, they, you know, they stand up a little bit straighter or this or that, what have you. That's what I'm afraid, that's what I know will happen to us as human beings, like as a species. And the reality is that it has not yet still entered really the public consciousness. It's starting to happen, but at the time that I was creating this, it had not entered the public consciousness at all, that privacy is a complete human construct. It does not exist. You are not private in your apartment. You are not private in your, anywhere. It's a total construct. And once that plays into the public consciousness, I'm afraid that what it means to be human is going to shrink and shrink and shrink. All of our expressions of gender and creativity and all of these things, I think, are just going to become more and more encapsulated. So to answer, or at least that's what I fear. So to answer your question, I think we need more visibility. And that's why I choose to do the flooding system. I think if you, I don't know, it's as simple as like, if you're a straight man and you want to wear a dress, just wear it. You know, if you want to color your hair blue and shave half of your scalp or get bioimplant, or like, just do it and be present and public if you're able to. It is not safe for everyone to do that, but I think it takes those kinds of demonstrations of like, look, we have not reached the breadth of what it means to be human yet, as a way to kind of counteract this surveillance, which comes from a patriarchal power structure that is put there to keep us all in check. Or at least that's my opinion. I would love to hear what you think, though.
I'm, you know, just hearing you kind of share the work that you've done is making me feel even more, it's making me think, right, in a way that I probably haven't done, in terms of your question about how do I feel about being, about surveillance and being observed. It's not something I think about on a day-to-day basis, but I know that when it comes to entering, you know, passwords, I always like to enter it. I don't like using biometric data at all. I've never. So yeah, so I try to do my bit, but I think there's more. I need to educate myself more on this topic. So I guess my next question to you really is, if we've watched Coded Bias, you know, what else, any other documentaries that you recommend that we watch, any other materials that is digestible for, you know, the average person to understand kind of what the challenges are and what steps that they can take to kind of mitigate some of the bias on in terms of their daily lives?
That's a great question. I mean, I think Coded Bias does such a great job. Citizen 4 is a very, very good documentary. It's less to do with facial recognition specifically, but follows the kind of taping of oh my God, why am I drawing a blank? Whistleblower, United States. IT military guy. Why can I not think? Edward Snowden. So that's a fantastic documentary film that really gets into the idea of what surveillance means in terms of the government, but also how a post 9/11, like literally all of the laws that like were passed to be able to make these illegal phone taps happen, to have the ability to compel Verizon using a FISA court to like hand over all of their data. Like all of that is really, really good. Artists that I would follow would be Benjamin Grosser. I think is one of like the most talented artists working, I think, in the realm of surveillance. There's also, oh God, oh, I'm so sorry. I am really, really bad with people's names, apparently. There is a female artist that's doing this really interesting kind of fashion line where she's created like clothing that has like famous people's faces. So the idea is that like if you're being scanned, the chances that they're gonna like scan Beyonce's face as opposed to your face, because like it, like, I don't know, there's some really interesting stuff that's there. But Electric Frontier Foundation is another great organization. And then oh, what's her name? Hold on. Is it Sherry Turkle? Sherry Turkle has an incredible book called Alone Together: Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. Really, really, really good book. Yeah, but and then of course, Simone Brown. How could I forget Simone Brown? Simone Brown's incredible researcher, and goes back into really thinking of surveillance not from a technological standpoint, but traces it back to the roots, to its roots in slavery in the United States. And just really, really interesting in how, and she builds these bridges of like how these old slave practices have translated into modern day surveillance. Really, really phenomenal.
No, all sounds great. Thank you so much, Leo.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing. I'm gonna, when I post the video recording, I'll also share with everyone the resources that you suggested.
Awesome, great.
But yeah, this was so informative, and just, it was great just like chatting with you, because normally at 500 Women Scientists, we talk to like scientists or people in the science field. So getting like an artist perspective is, yeah, totally different and so refreshing.
Awesome, awesome. And I just posted my email in the chat. If you ever want to have another conversation or send me some thoughts or just start email correspondence, like I'm very accessible. And like I said, for me, the artwork is not like the prosthetic or how it looks in the gallery. It's literally having these conversations. So
Great, thank you.